Thanks for joining us once again, and welcome to beautiful Roslyn, New York. Today is an interesting day because I just got bitten by a dog, and that was a weird experience, let me tell you. The reality is that I wasn't doing anything unusual, just walking down the street, and a homeowner got out of the car and the dogs jumped out. One of them ran at me and bit my hand and a book I had in my hand at the same time. Very unusual. Let's get down to our business. Today I'm focusing on something called Tesla Semi gets it is getting the Stepchild treatment. So the answer is yes, the Semi will start production theoretically at 50,000 units per year in January of the coming year, perhaps the end of the month of December. But there's an interesting question that lurks. How come there's like a 3 or 4 year backlog on the Tesla Semi, and we have a factory devoted to the Cybertruck, and there's an abundant number of Cybertrucks, and we're not using that factory to stop Cybertruck production and move to semi-production in the Austin factory? This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, would like some better ideas on investing and trading, please just join us on Patreon. So there are 4 or 5 points we'd like to cover. First 5 minutes is sort of review our points. Obviously, the second 5 minutes, implications of those points. So right now where we are is we're on a countdown to Semi arrival. There's a famous thing from the Seinfeld where they say, "No soup for you," is one of the famous lines, and it's kind of like the soup Nazi. Well, when it comes to the Tesla Semi and the EU, it's called "No Semi for you, EU." And why is that? Well, the first argument is that it takes at least 2 years to build a factory. The one Tesla is currently building will finish after 2 years. So in theory, the next Semi factory that will be built, in theory, in Germany, adjacent to or nearby the current Gigafactory, would allow them to share battery production. So basically, we have a situation where there's a, let's say, 3 to 5 year backlog on Tesla semi-trucks, and there's no backlog on the Cybertruck. In fact, there's 10,000 of them sitting around unsold. So, as I said at the beginning, why is that? Another data point is the fact that right now, we have some of the largest fleets in the world that have signed up to get in line for the Tesla Semi. Let's go through the general list of what we have so far. Walmart, 5,000 to 10,000 tractors needed. Obviously, Pepsi is in the 2,000 to 3,000 tractors needed zone. DHL, if they could get them, they would do 10,000 to 20,000 tractors by themselves. We could go on through this list, but there are numerous very large companies, all of whom are waiting for their opportunity to get their hands on the Tesla Semi, and at scale numbers. The problem is that those vehicles ain't available, and Elon and company keeps adding new members to that list and handing them initial copies of the Semi, but without scale production. So that's sort of point number 2. Point number 3, as I shared with you, there are some European customers who've begun signing up already. In particular, there's a Danish company that is a food distributor. Point number 4, one of the strangest parts of this whole deal is that the EU has begun fining auto companies that don't produce and sell EVs, but they're also fining and after trucking companies that are not producing and using electric vehicles as well. So it's a weird situation where they're getting fined, but they kind of don't have the technology to deliver functioning EVs. So kind of the next question is, how are we in this weird position of heavy demand, but no factory for that heavy demand? Well, the answer is, I think, shows up in many ways of what Elon has said thus far. In particular, what he pointed out is that the demand numbers for semis, that would fit up on what the Tesla Semi does, is somewhere in that 1.5 million vehicles a year globally. So that's an attractive theoretical number, but the problem is that you're slicing that a whole bunch of different ways in different types of vehicles, and Tesla is one type of vehicle. So the usable market for Tesla might be somewhere between 300,000 and 500,000 vehicles a year. And so the problem with this is, how can you be committed to something when you're selling as many as, let's say, 400,000 cars a quarter, and those cars are going to be replaced after 3 years, whereas the Tesla Semi might be selling, in theory, best case 300,000 units, 400,000 units a year, and they don't get replaced for 10 years. So now you're having to build factories, and those factories are going to sell vehicles for sure, but the problem is you quickly run out of market. So at the beginning, when there's heavy demand, you want to have more production, but the problem is, what happens after you go through that production? You now have an idle factory that costs you a lot of money to get going. The answer could be, well, why don't you just switch one of the other factories to semi-production temporarily and then go back to cars? So as I said, the truck market is 1 or 2 million a year, but there are 100 million cars purchased every year. So there's a lot more incentive to devote your attention to the larger number of cars being produced and sold. The final problem that I see that Tesla is having is lack of a champion. Anytime there's a Tesla vehicle that Elon really likes and is jazzed about, he has an inclination towards making sure that vehicle is prioritized when it comes to production. In the case of the Tesla Semi, what happened was that J.B. Durand, who's a former chief technology officer of Tesla that left, had a process where he asked Elon, how can we be building electric vehicles, but moving all those vehicles around on ICE trucks? And the answer that was arrived at was, we need to produce a truck that we can move vehicles around on, and it's reflective of sort of eco-friendliness consistent with our cars. So this kind of explains why we saw so many trucks going into the Tesla fleet. If you look at all the different ways, they're probably at 1,000 ICE trucks a year, now minus 100 or 200 based on EVs that have been produced. So we're in the zone right now where it's not like Elon hates the car. It's more like, instead of it being your child, it's more like the stepchild. There's no hatred there, but it's just interesting to watch how this is playing out. At any rate, I wanted to review this with you because there's this back and forth, like Tesla's about to go into production. Well, there's one possibility that lurks. If the numbers of Cybertrucks keep staying as low as it has been, it is entirely possible they may switch production in the Austin factory to the Semi, and in which case we end up with a lot of semis showing up and a lot of customers can get them earlier. It's not happening immediately because Elon has hope we'll restart Cybertruck sales, but we'll see if this might occur. So there are other things we could talk about when it comes to the Semi, but I wanted to review these because this is a mystery. How does a vehicle get its own factory, as in the Cybertruck, but it's not selling? So I wanted to review this with you today because it helps answer some questions as to why it is that Tesla is making a semi-truck. Small number of them are coming out, but it's not a priority. And I think this makes sense. Final note is our health tips. Please remember your 25 leg lifts a day. Also wanted to remind you that don't get bitten by a dog. It sucks. I just happened to walk by somebody's driveway and a fairly large St. Bernard jumped out and decided he was just going to bite me for no reason. And I avoided the bite, but the trauma of trying to figure out what do you do with a dog that big was very, very interesting. At any rate, have a great day. Bye for now. Thanks for joining us. Just a while, Heat Road. And in Jamaica we say, enough respect, walk good. Arrivederci, namaste.